Hello, parents of patriots. This is your host, Lisa Logan, and today I'm going to introduce you to a whole video series. You may remember from my introductory video how I mentioned that I did a huge presentation for Utah Parents United. And that is an hour-long presentation, and I know we're all very, very busy people. So what I'm going to do is break it down into sections and topics, and kind of just walk you through so that you can understand what social emotional learning is, who's behind it, who's funding it, and basically their agenda of where they want to go with social emotional learning. So I hope you enjoy this video series, and here we go, part one.
Social emotional learning, or SEL, is the new fad in education. And it is described as, quote, the process through which children acquire the skills to recognize and manage emotions, develop caring and concern for others, make responsible decisions, establish positive relationships, and handle challenging situations effectively, according to Castle. And that sounds really amazing, right? Social emotional learning is a classic case of a program that appears like it will really benefit children being used as a tool for indoctrination. I mean, what parent does not want their children to learn skills like kindness, empathy, self-regulation, and goal setting? That's what makes it the perfect Trojan horse. And unlike programs out there that started out with good motives only to get hijacked by bad people, that is not the case with social emotional learning. It was the intention of the people and organizations behind SEL to slip it into the schools under the guise of wanting to help our children gain better coping skills, and then to shift gears to enact their very clear and sinister agenda. From its inception, the main goal of SEL was to get children to all think about the world in a very specific way. Why, children? Aristotle understood that the fate of empires depends on the education of youth. Nobody understood that better than Adolf Hitler, who declared that he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And that's why by 1939, over 90% of German children were a part of the Hitler Youth Organization. Not only did it allow the Third Reich to indoctrinate children at their most impressionable ages, but it let the Nazis remove them from the influence of their parents, some of whom opposed the regime. The Nazi Party knew that families were an obstacle to their goals. The Hitler Youth was a way to get Hitler's ideology into the family unit, and some members of the Hitler Youth even denounced their parents when they behaved in ways not approved by the Reich. Yuri Bezmenov, a KGB defector, unveiled in a 1984 interview that the Russian government tactic to overthrow America was to not use physical warfare, but to instead use psychological warfare on the students of our country. Listen to what he says.
Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see.
So the year is now 2022, and this was 38 years ago. And according to Mr. Bezmenov, it takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation by exposing one generation of students to Marxism-Leninism ideology. How many generations do you think we're at today? This is happening right now through social and emotional learning, and I don't want to scare you, but it is everywhere. Since 2016, participation has grown from 8 states to more than 30 states and 1 U.S. territory, collectively representing more than 11,850 school districts, 67,000 schools, 2 million teachers, and 35 million students preschool to high school, according to CASEL in 2019. Today, all 50 U.S. states have SEL standards and competencies for preschool. 11 states have extended preschool standards to early elementary, and 18 states have standards for K-12. There is tremendous political will to bring SEL to schools, as evidenced by the more than 200 pieces of legislation referencing SEL introduced in 2019 alone. SEL is woven into nearly every subject they are teaching in school, making it nearly impossible to completely opt out. So, now the government, through the education system, can decide what values, attitudes, and beliefs your child should and shouldn't have. How many of you think that parents should decide those things? I'm with you. So you might ask, who is actually deciding what government-instilled values, attitudes, and beliefs should be taught? Well, the guy in the sweater has something to do with it, but you'd be surprised to hear that it's coming from the United Nations. These here are the entities that partner with national and local organizations to bring UN-based education to your children's classroom, and they plan to use social and emotional learning in order to do this. These programs were planned from their inception to be the entry point for critical race theory or social and racial justice, and other UN-based initiatives like promoting socialism over capitalism, advocating environmentalism to combat climate change, comprehensive sex education, and teaching gender education or theory, which we also call gender fluidity. All that it does is erase gender norms to obliterate the nuclear family, which is their goal. This entire presentation, starting with today's video, will walk you through how this has come to be and what you can do about it. So let's start at the beginning. Social emotional learning isn't new. It is deeply rooted in the history of American progressive education, with educators like Edward Thorndike and John Dewey advocating that we link education with psychology. They saw education's potential of social behaviorism, manipulating the psychological aspects of learning as a means of manipulating the child. Dewey, who was inspired by the Soviet educational system, was also a co-author and signer of the Humanist Manifesto, a religious document that rejected God and prescribed collectivism as a cure for society's ills. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, collectivism is a political theory associated with communism. More broadly, it is the idea that people should prioritize the good of society over the welfare of the individual. Collectivism is the opposite of what America was founded on, which is individualism. In a collectivist society, decisions benefit all the people, and the government has more control to distribute those resources. In an individualist society, each individual has the right to an equal opportunity under the law, and the government has less control, for instance, in our free market system. Results will vary based on individual decisions and what you do with the opportunity you have and the opportunity you build. That is the beauty of America. So in order to implement collectivism, and in turn social emotional learning, there has to be more government control, like this octopus here. So what did they do? They federalized the education system. The early awakenings of social and emotional learning coincide with and are related to outcomes-based education, or OBE. The central idea being that the school system, through the government, should establish centrally determined outcomes that the student should meet before progressing to the next level. The modern term for outcomes today is competencies. OBE developed into transformational OBE, designed to prepare students for, quote, life performance roles. This was essentially social engineering, developing productive workers to serve the needs of the global marketplace. The powers that be saw an opportunity to enact this educational reform when Bill Clinton got elected as president. A week after the election, Mark Tucker, president of the National Center on Education and the Economy, sent the new First Lady a now infamous 18-page letter titled Dear Hillary. Hillary had previously served on Mark Tucker's board at the NCEE. The letter outlines how schools and the workplace will be forcibly united to implement a national human resources development scheme. It urges the Clinton administration to, quote, advance the agenda to take over the entire U.S. educational system with the goal to train children in specific jobs to serve the workforce and the global economy instead of to educate them so that they can make their own life choices. Social emotional learning has always been a part of Mark Tucker's ideal system since 1994, when President Clinton signed the Goals 2000 Educate America Act, which was largely based on outcomes-based education. Goals 2000 contained 8 goals. 2 of them relate to SEL. Goal 1 concerns preschool. By the year 2000, all children in America will start school ready to learn. While many would assume this goal relates to children being, quote, ready to learn, academic preschool subjects such as letters, numbers, colors, and shapes, that wasn't the intent of progressive education officials. They wanted young children to be ready to learn government-instilled attitudes, values, and beliefs. Goal 8 states, by the year 2000, every school will promote partnerships that will increase parental involvement and participation in promoting the social, emotional, and academic growth of children. Note that academic growth is the last item on the priority list. The Pioneer Institute white paper on SEL sums up my thoughts on this nicely. They note that, quote, even though parental involvement isn't mentioned, many parents question whether the schools and the federal government should be setting norms for or mandating anything relating to the emotions and beliefs of their children. Nor did these parents consider themselves mere partners, subservient to government entities in this realm. Parents and pro-family organizations have long argued that based on unalienable rights and thousands of years of history, as well as legal precedent, they have the right to direct their children's education and care, and especially the formation of their children's attitudes, values, and beliefs. Besides Goals 2000, there were other laws that were signed, like the School to Work Act and the Reauthorized Elementary Secondary Education Act, or ESHA, also called Improving America's Schools Act of 1994, that fundamentally transformed education. These laws established the following mechanisms to restructure the public schools. Number 1, bypass all elected officials on school boards and in state legislatures by making federal funds flow to the governor and his appointees on workforce development boards. Number 2, use a computer database, aka a labor market information system, into which school personnel would scan all information about every school child and their family, identified by the child's social security number, academic, medical, mental, psychological, behavioral, and interrogations by counselors. This computerized data would be available to the school, the government, and future employers. Number 3, use national standards and national testing to cement national control of tests, assessments, school honors and rewards, financial aid, and the Certificate of Initial Mastery, or CIM, which is designed to replace the high school diploma. This opened the door to more federalized control of education and less local control in No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top in Common Core, and the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. And SEL was a prominent part of all of these statutory reauthorizations and initiatives. In my next video, we'll cover Common Core, or as I like to call it, Rotten to the Core.
I hope you enjoyed part 1. Join me next time as we dive into Common Core and what role the UN, or United Nations, has in your children's education. See you soon.